Right, the reason I'm asked to come in, because I'm one of these awful people, I'm an independent financial advisor, but we're basically the chosen independent financial advisors for the SSTA, and part of the reason why we use the likes of myself is I've been working in this industry now for about 24 years, specifically in the teaching sector, the health sector and the civil service sector. So I've sort of grown up with the pensions and grown up with all the pension changes. Okay. Now, as you will know, there have been pension changes that have happened, and as you will also know, there are lots of rumours flying around at the minute. The reason we wanted to bring these meetings forward, because Seamus initially wanted to do them in October, but we identified that there are certain time-bound decisions that need to be taken sooner rather than later. Okay. Oh yeah, come on in. Sorry, come on in. That's all right. Seamus decided no, we need to bring them forward. Right, because with the pension changes, there are certain things that need to be done within certain time periods. Then when we were talking about it, we said, well, hang on a minute, there's an awful lot of confusion out there, because in the staff rooms, more and more people are asking questions, and that unfortunately is where the rumour mill starts. I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes on the pension scheme, and I've tried to put together a presentation based on what we know of the scheme so far, and I want to try and take that through, or take you through it. Main objectives. Okay, first of all, dispel the rumours. Try and get this put in a format and in a language that people can look at it and have a slightly better understanding. Now, I'm doing this over the space of about an hour, so it's going to be quite intense. Let's put it that way. The second bit is to try and understand who the pension changes apply to and when they have applied or will apply. Okay. And the third one is understanding the time constraints with some of the options that are available if you've gone into the new pension scheme. Okay, if I achieve that, I'll be quite happy. So are we all happy enough with that? Okay. I think the only way I can do that is first of all to give an overview of the schemes as they were. Okay, because if you imagine there are now 3 potential schemes. You have the pre-2007 scheme, the post-2007 scheme, and the post-2015 scheme. Okay, so there's actually 3 schemes that we need to look at. I need to get an overview and try and pass across a bit of an understanding of the previous schemes, which are the pre-2007 and the post-2007. Okay. I then want to go on and I want to talk about the new scheme, the 2015 scheme. Okay, and the rules and regulations about that. And I want to try and bring it alive. I want to try and actually give you live examples to show you what I've worked out. Now I need to put a caveat in place, and I need to say that what I've worked out is based on my understanding of the scheme as it stands at the minute. Okay, I'm fairly confident that I'm right. Okay, because I'm normally pretty fastidious with these things. Okay, but I have to put that caveat in because I think I've gone farther with my calculations than even the SPTA have gone. Okay, but I want to take you through it, and I want to try and show you. I then want to talk to you about how to manage your retirement date, because one of the biggest rumours that's out there at the minute is, am I going to have to retire at 109? Okay, the answer is no, you're not, and I want to try and make sure that people understand the rules of the scheme, right, so that you can actually still get away at 60, because my belief is that that's still in the cards. Okay, and again, don't worry, I've got this vested, I like the look, right, it is still on the cards. I have a vested interest in it, because my wife's in the scheme. Okay, and the reason I have a vested interest in it, I'm very interested in her pension income, and also at the worst I will get half. Okay, so then it's what to consider in the way forward, and we're going to try and cover all of this in about an hour. Now, I like to put one rule in place with presentations. As and when you have a question, ask it at that point. There is also no such thing as a stupid question, and the reason I'm saying that is you may not feel the question is relevant at the end. I will encourage people to ask questions as we go through. So, I'm going to start with the pre-2007 scheme. Now, a quick question, did anybody join the pension scheme after 2007? No, so you're all in the pre-2007 scheme. Okay, that's good. The pre-2007 scheme, okay? Now, the pre-2007 scheme, for the benefits that you have built up in that so far, has a normal pension age of 60. And for the benefits that you have built up in the pre-2007 scheme, that normal pension age of 60 will stay. Okay? That's not changing. So if you've been in the scheme for 15 years up until the 1st of April 2015, and then you've moved into the new scheme, you have 15 years built up in the pre-2007 scheme, and your normal pension age stays at 60. Okay, so that's the first thing. The next thing we look at is when can you get your pension benefits. Well, you can actually get your pension benefits under any of the schemes. That's pre-2007, post-2007, or 2015. You can actually get at them at any point from the age of 55. But obviously if you decide to take it at 55, you are taking it early. Okay, at which point you suffer something called an actuarial adjustment. Right? Now, I'm going to try and very basically explain how an actuarial adjustment works. If you imagine you're retiring at 60, okay? The good news is the government knows when you're going to die. Pleasant thought for a Wednesday afternoon. But the government know when you're going to die, and they know you're going to die probably around the age of 80. Okay, and some people will live past 80 and some people will die before 80, but the law of large numbers, they work it out to 80. So if you were retiring at 60, they would say, well, we're probably going to have to pay this pension for 20 years. So if you imagine if your overall pension pot was worth about £100,000, they would take 100,000, they would divide it by 20, and that would give you a pension of £5,000. But if you decide to retire at 55, unless you do a very strange deal with the government to die 5 years early, right, they know they're going to have to pay that to you for 25 years. So assuming your pension pot was still £100,000, it wouldn't be, because you would have 5 years less contributions in it, but assuming it was still £100,000, it would be 100,000 divided by 25, which would give you a pension of around £4,000. And in essence, that's how an actuarial adjustment works. They've tried to be fair, and they've tried to pick a date and say, by that date, whether you go for early retirement or not, will have paid the same amount of money out to you. Okay? And that, in essence, is the gamble that you take. As a general rule of thumb, probably if you live anywhere past between the ages of about 77 and 80, right, you'd probably be better deferring your pension, okay, until you were 60. But up to that date, you're actually, believe it or not, generally quids in, okay? Don't go taking any drastic decisions at the age of 77 though, okay? Yes?
I have a question. I started to work in Scotland on the 19th of December 2006.
Yep.
So I got paid a month later. Am I considered to be on the pre-1st of January 2007?
When did you get your first pay slip?
That might have been a month after I started.
Okay, if it was the month after you started, there's every possibility you've snuck into the post-2007 scheme.
Okay.
Now the way to find it out is to actually ring the SPPA down in Galashiels and ask them the question, which scheme are you in, or which scheme were you in, and they'll be able to tell you that.
Okay.
Okay.
So if I did get my first slip in December,
if it's December, you've snuck in under the wire. You're the pre-2007 scheme. Okay. I'll be explaining the post-2007 scheme, but that's one of the ones that, if I was you, I would be ringing up to try and find out. Okay. But a very, 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 very good point. So you can get your normal pension age of 60 staying. You can get at your pension from the age of 55. Okay, if you want. How's your pension worked out? Now, there's a couple of things that are quite important here. First of all, the pension calculation. For every full year that you work, okay, you are credited with 1/80th of your pensionable salary. Okay, and I'll talk about the pensionable salary in a second. Okay, but the pension calculation is 1/80th. Now, this is something that we need to get across, because that 1/80th is applied to your pensionable salary when you retire at 50, 57, 60, 62, 63, whatever it is. Okay? How they account for you being part-time in that period, if you are, is as opposed to crediting you with a full 80th for that year that you were part-time, say for example you work 3 days a week, they would credit you with 3/5 of 1/80th. Okay? So you could find that you've worked, say for example, for 38 years, but you may only have 36 years service in the pension scheme, and that's to allow for part-time. And the reason I'm explaining that is your pension is then always worked out on your whole time equivalent pensionable salary. Okay? Because if you think about it, if you're part-time, and say for example you're on £16,000 a year, you would want your pension to be based on the £34,000 a year. Okay? And it is, it's always based on your whole time equivalent. But this is one of the important points here, which is pensionable salary. Right? Pensionable salary is either the 12 months earnings before you retire, or the average of the best 3 consecutive years in the 10 years before you retire, adjusted for inflation. Okay? Now, why is this important? You're going, I'm in the new scheme, I don't need to know that. No, you do need to know this. Because for the benefits you've built up in this scheme, these definitions will apply when you retire. Okay, so if you're sitting at the minute 35 or 40, you're going to need to retain this information probably for about another 20 odd years. Okay? And why it's important, this at the minute is the preferred amount. Okay, this is the bit that normally works out. So if you're, say for example, you're on 34,877, which is top of scale for a teacher at the minute, you would probably find that your pensionable pay would work out to be realistically maybe 37,000, 38,000 pounds. Okay, so it's higher.
Why?
Why? Because they're looking back over the last 10 years. So say for example you've been top of scale, they would probably take the years 2006, 2007, 2008. They would take the average of that and then they apply the consumer prices to it for each year. So do you remember from 2008, 2009, 2010, no pay rises? Well, your pensionable salary was still going up by the consumer prices index during that period. Okay? And that's why it's higher. Now that will change as we go on. Sorry, yes?
Clearly, our benefits in the pre-2007 pension,
Yep.
it's only accrued up until 1st of January 2007, yeah?
No.
It's current.
It's current. It goes right the way through, okay? Because in 2007, they changed the rules, but only for new members.
Well, how come I had to start paying increased contributions post-2007?
Because the government changed the rules on all of the pension schemes, and it wouldn't matter whether you were in the pre-2007 or post-2007 schemes. They said everyone's having to put their contributions up, okay? And that was one of the loopholes that was in the pension schemes that they could utilise.
But that then ends in 2015.
Depending on your age, okay? But can I ask your age at the minute?
I think I miss it by about 12 weeks. I'm 49 and a
Aye, okay, yeah. In that case, you miss out on table relief. So yes, on the 1st of April 2015, you went into the new scheme. Yeah. Okay. There was someone else that was actually closer than you last night.
Where I thought it was the closest.
Yeah. No. There's a few people, but yeah. What you're saying is the benefits you've accrued in the 2007 scheme are protected up until 2007. So for those years' service.
No, up until 2015.
Sorry, 2015.
Yes.
You're exactly right. For those years' service, you have to remember these definitions. Now, why it's important, every now and then I'm talking to someone, say for example they're 58, and my advice to them is, you need to retire now, right now, not at 60, now, okay? And the reason being, because if they had conserved salary, or had a promoted post, and that promoted post stopped and the conserved salary stopped, you want to make sure that that conserved salary fits into this definition. And there's certain people that I talk to that the advice is retire now, because see, if you stay in the scheme for the next 2 years and work full time for the next 2 years, your pension is still going to be less at the age of 60 than it is with you taking it now. Okay? And that's one of the most important bits to get across, because as well, in your situation, you're probably going to have to remember that for about, what, 17 years? No, 11 years. Because you've got to actually try and retain this information, and it's going to be harder and harder to remember, because it will become more and more distant. Okay, so
will you be able to give us this PowerPoint?
PowerPoint presentation is emailed out to you by the SSTA, as is a help sheet, because there's bits that you need to be able to take them directly into the website. So yes, you'll get copies of the presentation. One of the other things we want to get across as we get deeper into the presentation, please share this with your colleagues, okay? Because I'm going to be talking about bits that people don't necessarily know, okay? And we need to get the message out there, okay?
So can I just
Yes, go for it.
confirm? So if you are in the pre-2007
Yeah.
one and you are in a promoted post, let's say, and then at the age of 55 if you decide that actually you don't want to do that
Yeah.
anymore and you'd rather go back to being a teacher,
Yeah.
then as long as you would have then 3 consecutive years, and that would still
That would be exactly right. As long as you were planning to retire at 60
yeah.
or thereabouts, there would be no problem. There would be absolutely no problem with that, and you could turn around and say, no, that's it, I'm stepping back down. Okay, you would take a drop in salary, but you'd be stepping back.
But it's still, the actual pension itself would be based on the average of your best 3.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Okay. Are we all happy enough with that? Yes. Question at the back.
last one, is it the 2 bullet points, is it either the average or the
It's-
salary and the last 12 months?
Whichever is best,
Okay.
okay, whichever is best, and the SPPA work it out for you. And in 24 years, I've actually never known them to be wrong.
Okay.
Okay, the SPPA are actually quite good. They're on the ball. Okay. Now, in the other thing you get with the pre-2007 scheme is you're automatically given a lump sum. Okay, and the lump sum is 3 times your pension. Now you're given that whether you want it or not. Okay, and that lump sum is currently tax-free. Alright, and I'll say, there you go, you've got it. Well, I don't want it, I want more income. No, tough luck, you've got it. Okay, you are given it, that's it. In 2007, for new members, okay, so this is new teachers coming in, not existing teachers, but new teachers coming in, they launched a new scheme. And part of the reason why they launched the new scheme was they wanted to ensure that the schemes were sustainable. Okay, so what they did, the first thing they did was they looked at the pension scheme and they said, right, let's push the retirement age back by 5 years. Okay, so say for example you went in January, well in that situation of 2007, suddenly your normal retirement age is 65, not 60. Okay, but as a trade-off for that, what they said was we will improve how quickly the pension grows. Okay, so they changed it from a 1/80th accrual rate to a 1/60th accrual rate. Okay, and as a general rule of thumb, the smaller the number at the bottom of the fraction, the faster your pension's growing. Okay, that'll come into play later on. They removed the right for you automatically to get a lump sum. Okay, but that's the only right that they removed. You still have the right to turn around and say, I would like a lump sum. So you can still turn around and say, yeah, I want X amount as a lump sum. They haven't removed that right. You can still demand a lump sum from it. And at the minute, that's still tax-free. Okay? And they kept the same pensionable earnings. So let's have a look at a couple of examples to see how this works out. Okay? So the first one is the pre-2007 scheme. Okay? Let's assume somebody had pensionable salary of £30,000. They had 36 years of service. They had an accrual rate of an 80th. The calculation is quite simple. It's salary multiplied by service divided by 80. Okay, so 30,000 multiplied by 36 divided by 80 gives a pension of £13,500. The lump sum's 3 times that, so 3 times 13,500 is 40,500. Nice and simple. The government also gives you the ability, if you want, you can turn around income to enhance your lump sum. Okay? And in this situation, if you wanted to do it, you could commute the income all the way down to £10,848 and increase the tax-free lump sum up to £72,321. Now the calculation is quite easy. Okay? Because what you do is you take the pension, you multiply that by 20. To that, you are adding, now the lump sum, but you've already got to have multiplied the lump sum by 20 and divided it by 12. And take that final figure and divide it by 4.6667. Piece of cake. Okay? Easiest way to do it, your face is brilliant. It's just, the eyebrows are up here at the minute going, what on earth? Easiest way to do it, if you log on to the SPPA website, they have fantastic calculators that will do this for you, and they even put it in nice graphical forms, with red and green so you can see it. Okay?
It's not a calculation, I'm wondering why 20?
Why 20?
Why 20?
Well, the easiest way to do it is actually, if you take the pension, say for example, if the pension was £10,000, multiply the pension by 5.357, okay? And it's going to get you as near as damn it, because that would equal 53,700, and that would reduce the pension down to around £8,000. So as opposed to worrying about all of this, if I'm sitting in somebody's house, and they want a quick estimation, I will take the straightforward pension, multiply it by 5.357. Right.
No, I understand that, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying, where does 20 come from? Why 20?
Why 20?
Yeah.
Oh, heaven only knows.
Right, okay.
That's an accurate. Probably this 20 adds into this 20 by some way, and this is the conversion ratio for the
That's just the formula they use.
that is technically the full formula. Whereas it's far easier, just go 5.357. Yeah, it's just one of those ones where you let the actuary go and do what the actuary does. Right? And don't bring him out and let him talk to people. Just let him do the bit that he does. Alternatively, let's assume you're in the post-2007 scheme. You would have the ability to take it all as income. So you could take it all as £18,000. But if you turned around and said, well actually, do you know what, I want the same basic lump sum, so I still want £40,500 as a lump sum, If you wanted to do that, your income would work out to be £14,625. Okay? Well, hang on a minute. Everyone else in the room should be going, wait a minute, mine was 13,500. Why is his more? Right? Well, the reason yours is more is you would only get 100% of that if you were 65. You'd get 100% of yours if you were 60. So if you tried to take that at 60, you would only get 77.6% of those benefits. That's the impact of that actuarial adjustment that we're talking about. Okay? Give you an indication, say for example, if everyone in the room is in the pre-2007 scheme and they say, right, we want to take our benefits at 55, well, the actuarial adjustment factor at the minute is 81.4%. Okay, that's to give you an indication of how the actuarial adjustment works. People will say it's 5% a year. It's between probably 4.1 and 4.3% a year. Okay, happy enough with me so far?
If you're saying then that you don't get your full amount, would it be better then staying on to your 65 in the pre-2007? Would that
No.
then raise you up?
No. The only way it raises you up, okay, within the pre-2007 is for each year that you work, you are given an extra 1/80th. Okay, so say for example you got to 60 and you're 36/80ths. If you go on to 65, okay, if you're 36/80th at that point and you continue to work full time,
Yeah.
you would then have, what would that be, 41/80ths.
Yeah.
Okay, but there is no actuarial enhancement to work after your normal pension age. Okay, now that's a very important point. I'm going to come to at the end of the presentation because I want to talk to you about the flexibility that I think you will have by the time you get there. Okay, but for certainly your pre-2007 benefits, my view is you want to take those as close to 60 as you can physically get. Okay, so let's go on. Protected status. Now, the government tried to be fair on this, and what they tried to say was, if on the 1st of April 2012, you were within 10 years of your normal pension age, so if you were pre-2007, you had to be 50, if you were in post-2007, you had to be 55, you have protected status. And what that means is, you will get to retire from the scheme that you are in. You will not be asked to move schemes. You will get to retire from the scheme that you are in. Okay? Now it's not that you will have to retire at 60 or 65. You can continue working on right the way through until you've 45/80ths. At that point, that's the maximum service you can have in the scheme. Or alternatively, if you want, working through until the age of 75. And then they'll kick you out of the scheme. Generally, as far as I can see, all the presentations I've done, that's not really the preferred option. Okay?
Is that
But
45 years of service then, max?
45 years of service in these schemes. In these schemes, in the pre-2007 and the post-2007. That's the maximum amount of service you can have in those schemes. Okay? Under those rules. Okay? Alternatively, this is the bit you were talking about, if you were within 10 years and 13.5 years, you have linear taper relief. Personally, I think that sounds like an illness, but you have linear taper relief. Okay, and with linear taper relief, what they will do is they will let you stay in the scheme for slightly longer. Now we've got tables up here, people want to take them away if they think they have linear taper relief. Okay, and you can actually work out when you're going to be asked to move into the new scheme. But to try and explain it to you, if on the 1st of April 2012, now don't forget we're going back to 2012 here, if on the 1st of April 2012, say for example you were 49, okay, so you were a year too young, you were a year outside of your protected status, but you've got linear taper relief. The government gave a 10-year guarantee from the 1st of April 2012 to the 1st of April 2022. They will take that 1 year that you're too young and they will double that figure. Okay, so that will be 2 years. And they will take that off the date of the 1st of April 2022. So in that situation, you would be moved into the new scheme on the 1st of April 2020. It will actually be the 31st of March 2020 to be very accurate. Okay, but that's basically what will happen. Okay, so in your situation, do you have linear taper relief? Sorry, yourself.
Yeah, I think, so I would have been, I'm 49 now, so I would have been 47, 46.
47. Well, is your date of birth between the 1st of April 1962 and the 30th of September 1965?
Yeah, no, I'm
No.
outside that.
You're outside that.
I'm 1st November,
You're 1st November. In that case,
65.
you don't have linear taper relief. On the 1st of April, you would have moved into the new scheme. Okay? So that doesn't...
He's even closer than me then. I thought
I mean, actually, to be honest, it makes no difference. If you were, say, for example, 13 years or 3 years and 4 months, it's only really valuable if, say, for example, you were 49 and a half on the 1st of April 2012, then yeah, most of your benefits are going to stay in the pre-2007 scheme, okay? But if you're sort of 47 and a half, 46 and a half, the benefits aren't great, okay? However, for colleagues who still have linear taper relief, I generally feel you are better staying in the old scheme for as long as possible, unless you are planning to work after your state pension age. If you're planning to work after your state pension age, there is an argument to look at moving across. And I haven't actually found anyone that wants to do that yet in all the presentations that I've done, but I still need to say it. Yes?
Slightly off the topic here, but you talked about the government working on this notional life expectancy of 80.
Yeah.
Many years ago, and it was many years ago, it was in the 90s, and I don't know how old the figures were there, but I saw the actuarial tables, life expectancy tables for a Scottish male teacher
in Govan,
retiring at 65 across Scotland. Retiring at 65, life expectancy was 67.
Yeah.
Retiring at 60, it went. Retiring at 60, it went up to 71, and retiring at 55, it went up to high 70s. The implication was, well, of course, you could talk about people who are less affluent, probably more likely to be smokers, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. But the implication was it was the last 10 years that put you in an early grave. And my understanding was when this legislation was being floated, the government refused to issue the actuarial guidance for life expectancy for Scottish teachers. Is that information in the public domain now?
Don't know is the answer. You would technically need to go for the Office of National Statistics, but you would be able, if you wanted to get the information, because that would be the likes of the annuity providers. Because with an annuity provider, you're looking, an annuity is an income for life, okay, but it will be done by Legal and General or Prudential or Bright Grey, etc. Okay, they have worked it out based on postcode. So, say for example, if you were a male teacher of 65 teaching in Govan, well, technically you were dead 10 years ago. Okay, so it's that sort of information is available. You may not get it from the Office of National Statistics, but you will be able to get that information because other people will have worked it out. Okay, because it is career-based as well as location-based. Okay.
They might not share that information though, because the information is not in public domain, it's used for their commercial purposes.
How you would do it then is you would ring up as a prospective client and give those details, and they'll give you a quote over the phone. Don't call me genius, right? But that's exactly what I would do. I would just say, right.
Give you a quote, and what would you, so they give you a quote for the cost of the annuity, but would you then be able to say what's the life expectancy?
Well, you can do, because if it's, say for example you're putting 100,000 in, and they say they're going to give you an annuity rate of 7%, right, well then you work that back and go, right, you're expecting me to die on this date, so you can work out what the life expectancy is. Okay. However, that being said, with these schemes, they're going for the laws of large numbers, because interestingly with the Office of National Statistics, they have not changed the life expectancy yet. I'm doing a presentation tomorrow for the civil service, and the dates of death have not changed.
Since?
Well, since probably the last 10 years, right? Whilst they're talking about people living longer, they're not, the Office of National Statistics is not showing it. Now, the argument they'll come back with and say, yes, but we're not talking about now, we're talking about 10 or 15 years down the line, we're making these changes for active members at the minute, who say, for example, are 40 or 35, etc., etc., etc. Okay, sorry, did you have a question?
I was just thinking that information would be available on Freedom of Information.
Yeah.
Yeah, which one you need to do a formal request. I'm always very, very suspicious about the freedom of information.
Oh no, I mean the SSTA could do that and put it on the website.
They could, that's a good point. That is a good point. Yep.
I mean, it's a public body, the Office of National Statistics, and they legally have to make all their information
They're legally
available.
obliged.
So have one request in, they have to respond to you within, I think, 28 days.
But that's if they've broken it down that far. They may not have broken it down that far. You know, and that I genuinely don't know. And the other thing is I don't know what that would prove, because what the government, when we come on, I mean, I think it's actually the next slide, the government has said the deal is as the deal is. Right, now we've given a guarantee it won't change. Right, so I think it would turn around and say, yeah, great, but that's the deal. That's what we negotiated, that's what's been agreed. Okay? But we'll come on to that, because with the new pension scheme, don't be that scared. Okay, it's not that bad a scheme, and we'll go through the actual calculations for it. Okay, right, so on the 1st of April 2015, if you didn't have linear taper relief and you didn't have protected status, the government launched a new pension scheme. Okay, and it was called Section or Teachers Pension Scheme Scotland 2015. It is what's known as a career average scheme. So, with the previous schemes, your pension was based on your final salary. So you were paying contributions down here based on a final salary. That will be calculated up here. Okay? So you're in the situation that if your career went like that, it was brilliant. Okay? We turned around and said, right, well we were concerned about that. Okay? This is the SPPA and the government talking, we were concerned about that. And we feel it would be fairer if we, as opposed to credit you with a final salary, give you a credit for each year that you work. Okay? What they said was, what we're going to do is we're going to give you an accrual rate of 1/57th of what you earned for that year. Okay? And that's 1/57th for that year, no matter what you earn, whether full-time, part-time, it's what you earn. And they'll put that 1/57th on the retirement shelf. And then the next year they'll do 1/57th, the year after that they'll do 1/57th, etc., etc., etc. Whilst it sits on the retirement shelf, okay, it will grow by the Consumer Prices Index, okay, but most importantly, whilst you're still in teaching, it will also grow by a rate of 1.6%. Now that 1.6% makes a massive difference because it's the equivalent of compound, okay, and it does make a big, big difference to the figures. Now, the trade-off for that was they said, right, well, we're changing the normal pension age to your state pension age. And that's one of the concerns I've got. The state pension age is fluid. My state pension age is 67. Okay, if you go back 10 years, it was 65. If you go back 10 years for the females in the room, your normal pension age was 60. Okay, so it's moved, and that's something that concerns me, but there's an option on that we'll come on and we'll talk about. And the government pledged that there would be no more fundamental changes to the scheme for 25 years from the 1st of April 2012. Okay? Now, this is the bit where I normally ask who believes that the government can keep that fundamental or that promise. I say yes they do, and the reason I say yes they do is that word there.
Fundamental. What's
Okay.
considered to be fundamental?
Well, for example, if you read the first point, they've given a provisional annual accrual rate. So they're starting at 157. In other words, they're reserving the right that if they want, they can change the accrual rate. We know they can change the contribution rates, and we also know that this can change as well. Okay? That sounds all very one-sided. However, the government have to keep this scheme competitive. Do you know why? If there is no money coming into the scheme, in other words, everybody leaves the scheme, well, they still are contractually obliged to pay all those pensions. Okay? So they have to keep in the game with this. They can't just turn around and say, well, we want to shut that. That would literally bankrupt the government. Okay? And that's why, when you actually sit down and do the math, this isn't a bad scheme. And I would actually put forward an argument to say that this scheme is better than the post-2007 scheme. Okay? And that's why people shouldn't be scared about it. So, okay, let's go on and have a look at this. So what happens when you retire? Protected status, well, you're retiring from your pre-2007 scheme, nothing's changed. You can retire when you want. If you want to go 55, you can go at 55. If you want to work on to 68, you can work on to 68. For those who don't have or either have linear taper relief or have no protection, you're then in the situation you're going to retire with two pensions. Okay? Well, let's say you want to retire at 60. All the benefits you built up in your pre-2007 scheme, you will get at 60 and you will get 100% of those benefits. Okay, there will be no actuarial penalty on it. They will be based on your pensionable salary at the time of retiring. You will then have your career average scheme, your 2015 scheme, paying out. But obviously if you're retiring at 60, you're retiring early. So the actuarial factor in that, if your normal pension age is 67, which is about average for most of the people that we're talking to, then you're in the situation you would get 71.6% of those benefits. Okay? So if it was £10,000, you would actually get 7,100. Okay? But let's try and do a live example. Okay, let's actually try and look at it. Now this is, again, I want to put the caveat in here. This is based, and this is purely for estimation purposes, and this is based on the knowledge we have of the scheme now, and this is trying to project forward, so it's quite difficult to do. It assumes somebody on a salary of £30,000. Okay, and I'm trying to do a like-for-like quote based on what the SPPA produced and what Section 2015 will produce. Now it's somebody that's top of scale, okay, and it's somebody that's quite happy with their lot. They're not actually looking for promotion. They're not career hungry, okay? They're not aiming to be a head teacher, right? This is somebody who's just turning around and saying, actually, do you know what? I'm happy being a teacher, okay? Born on the 1st of September 1969, salary of £30,000, joined the scheme on the 1st of September 1991, figured at the top. Retirement date is 2029, they're 60. They're not working after the age of 60. That's it, they're not doing it, okay? And on the 1st of April 2015, they had to join the care scheme. That was it, no choice, you're joining. If nothing had changed, okay, in other words, if nothing had changed, they hadn't been launched in the new scheme, and they'd stayed in pre-2007, the pension would have worked out at £14,250, and the lump sum would work out at £42,751. As best as I can work it out, allowing for the 157th and the 1.6%, and the actuarial adjustment factor for taking the benefits early at 60, okay? If this person wanted exactly the same lump sum of 42,000, the pension would work out at £13,822. Now that's a shortfall of £427, and from what I can see in any of the ones that I've worked out, it's working out between 3 and 5% as a drop in the projected pension income. As far as I'm concerned, that's not that bad. Okay, bearing in mind what it started off to be. And incidentally, the first offer the government came in with, very few people do know this, but the first offer the government came in with was a 1/100th career average. Okay? So the smaller the number in the bottom of the fraction, the faster it grows. 6.3 negotiation has dropped down to 157. Okay? Happy enough with that? Yes, go for it.
If the post-2015 pension age is 67, as will be for most people, I was under the impression you wouldn't be able to take it until you were, say, 62, 5 years early. You will still be able to take an actuarially reduced version of that at 60.
From the age of 55. They're not changing that rule. Okay? You can access it from 55. Okay? And there's more flexibility coming. Okay? Because I want to try and give live examples. Okay? And one of the live examples is a genuine live example of a member. Okay? And we took about a day going through this to work it all out because I wanted to do it for the presentation. The individual didn't actually make themselves obvious for the seminar that they attended and waited until the end and said, that was me. Okay, so this is a proper example to try and show you the flexibilities that are there. Okay, so how are you going to manage your retirement date? You're in the situation, I believe personally 60 is still on the cards, down to financial circumstances. So what can you do? Because everyone is turning around and saying, oh, I'm going to do something privately. My view is I don't think you should. And part of the reason why I don't think you should, I think you should still look within the pension scheme, is I believe there's enough flexibility within the pension scheme. And the other reasons why I think you should look within the pension scheme, if you stay within the pension scheme, guys like me don't get paid. Okay? And if I'm not being paid, that means that money that normally would go to pay me goes into your pension scheme, which means you're better off. Okay? It's called commercial suicide on my part. Okay? But so, what can you do? Now, everyone can do this. These are this was available on the old scheme, this was available in the new scheme, etc. Everyone can do this. And it is called additional pension, and it's called additional voluntary contributions. Additional pension, how does additional pension work? Additional pension is the same as paying in to the scheme that you're in. You're given a cast iron guarantee. Okay, it's backed by the government, it's not going anywhere, it's safer than houses, it's safer than banks and building societies. Okay, and you're turning around and saying, right, when I retire at the age of 60, I want an additional income. I want an additional pension. So you could turn around and say, my pension's worked out at £14,250. Do you know what? I want £16,250. So you turn around and say you want that extra amount of money. The computer then spits back and says, as a monthly contribution, you need to contribute X amount. Now when it shows you that monthly amount, always remember that that is coming off your salary before you pay tax. So you're receiving tax relief on that contribution. So say for example the contribution comes back and says it's £100, chances are you're going to see your salary drop to £80. Okay, but there's still £100 going into the scheme for you. And when you reach that selected age, which for most of you will have to be now 65, you then get those benefits back. Okay, and they'll turn around and say, right, it is now 2,000, that has been indexed, so that £2,000 may now be £2,500, you will receive that income is guaranteed for life, and that income will go up in line with inflation. You either put spouse's pension into it, and you carry no investment risk. Okay? Unfortunately, most people come and talk to me about this when they are about 3 years from their chosen retirement age, in which point it is remarkably expensive, because you've got to remember, you're not, say for example, buying £2,000, you're buying £2,000 for the rest of your natural life. Okay, so hopefully you're buying lots of them. Okay. Alternatively, there was additional voluntary contributions, and still are additional voluntary contributions run by Prudential. Okay. People did not like the Prudential additional voluntary contributions, and they didn't like them for two reasons. Okay. Under the old rules, you would be putting money into a pot, so you would contribute into a pot, and yes, you would still get tax relief on that contribution, but you put money into the pot. You carry all of the investment risk, so you don't know how it's going to perform. It could go up or it could go down, depends on the pot that you pick. Okay. Then when you went to take the benefits, so you reach 60 and you're retiring, you could only take 25% out as tax-free cash, and the remainder you had to buy an income with. Now, they've changed the rules on this, and I'll explain those in a second. But this is why they didn't like annuities. So if you imagine you were retiring in 2008, I don't know if anybody noticed, there was a small downturn in the stock markets. Right? Just minor ones, only about 40%, it's fine. Right? So you suffered a massive drop in your overall value of your fund. And then suddenly you were in the situation that you were having to lock into this annuity rate. Annuity rates are based on long-term gilt rates, which basically are the same as interest rates. So you were locking into this really, really low interest rate for the rest of your life. Okay, and people looked at it and went, that's not fair, I don't want to do it. So people weren't actually getting to access their ABC funds, because it wasn't good value for them. Chancellor stood up in March 2013 and said, actually, we're changing the rules on this. Okay, we've no choice, but we're going to have to change the rules. And removed the necessity for you to purchase one of these annuities. You can still do it if you want, but gave you the ability to do ad hoc withdrawals from these sorts of plans. Okay? Strangely enough, not necessarily the Prudential plan, but from these sorts of plans. But it means that you're in a situation, say for example you decide to retire at 60, and your state pension is due to be paid at 67. Right? Well, that's a 7-year period where you know you're going to get your state pension at 67 and your income's going to go up. So you probably want to try and replace some of that income over that 6-year period. If you use the likes of additional voluntary contributions for that later on in life, because you can't afford it earlier on, because little Johnny's at university or little Jemima's at university, right? This is actually quite a good way of trying to fund that gap, because you're only funding the gap for 6 or 7 years. Okay, and that's where suddenly ABCs have come back on the map in certain circumstances. Okay? Now, in this room, I presume nobody's got linear taper relief. No? Okay. There are things coming up now that I'm going to talk about which are only available to those of you that are in the 2015 scheme. Okay? So if you've got protected status, you can't do these. Right? And it's new flexibilities that have come about, and one of them is particularly time-bound. Okay? It's called Early Retirement Reduction Buyout Option, or ERBO. Okay? One point I would make on ERBO, if you have linear taper relief, it only becomes time-bound when you go into the scheme. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. Now, actuarial buyout, or ERBO. With this, it gives you the ability to lock your pension age. Okay? You know the way I said I was concerned that my state pension age is 67? Well, it could be 68, 69. For each year it goes past, okay, the actuarial adjustment figure is 3%. Okay? So if my pension age changes from 67 to 68, that costs me 3% of my benefits if I still want to retire, say for example at 65. Okay, and so on and so on. This gives you the ability, if you want, to try and lock your benefits. So you can turn around and say, well actually, I want my benefits locked at 65. You cannot go any earlier than 65. Okay, because when you get the form, it'll say, oh, I can buy 1, 2 or 3 years. The maximum you can buy is back to the age of 65. So the maximum years I could buy would be 2 years. Okay, but Stuart, why would I want to do that? I want to retire at 60. Well, the reason you'd want to do that is you're locking the actuarial adjustment. Okay, it means the actuarial adjustment at 60 will apply from 65, not 67, not 68, not 69. Okay, so you're actually turning around and saying, I'm stopping that there, I'm prepared to pay the extra contributions. The challenge that we face is that under the teacher scheme, not the health scheme, not the civil service scheme, but under the teacher scheme, they have turned around and said, for you to be eligible to do this, okay, you have to elect to do it within 6 months of joining the scheme. So when did you guys join the scheme?
1st of April.
When does 6 months stop? 30th of September. Okay? Now, SSTA and myself, we're trying to encourage people to at least look at this and give it very serious consideration, now very quickly. Okay? Because it's actually relatively easy to look at because it's on the website, and with the articles we send out and with a copy of the presentation, etc., we give you instructions as to how to go and find it. But it's one of these ones, because they have put the time constraint on it, immediately I'm thinking, well hang on, this is a good deal, and I do believe it is a good deal, and the example I'm about to give you I think will demonstrate that. Okay, so that's the first thing that's available. Now, try and explain 1 or 2 of the rules around it. These are the costings. Okay, so I am 46, I'm wishing my life away. I'm 46. If I wanted to buy 2 years, for every year that I want to buy, it is going to cost me 0.77% of my gross salary. Okay, so if I were to buy 2 years, it's 0.77 multiplied by 2, which is 1.54%. Now, 1.54% of my gross salary, I only pay the net. Okay, so I only end up paying about, what, 80% of those. But here's where it gets complicated. When I'm 47, it goes to 0.78. And then it goes to 0.79, 0.8, etc., etc., etc. So the cost will go up. The argument for that is what I'm doing is I am locking the 2015-2016 year. Then I'm locking the 2016-2017 year. Then 18, 19, 19, 20, all the way across. If the government then suddenly turn around and move my retirement age, say for example to 68, I'm then in the situation where I would need to buy 3 years. Okay? Which means suddenly, say for example they did that when I was 50, we'll make it easy, we'll say 51, then suddenly my contributions would increase to 2.4%. At that point, I would take a decision, do I want to pay 2.4% or do I want to pay 1.6%? Because from then on, if I only still want to lock in at 2 years, for those years, the actuarial adjustment would apply from 66. So if you imagine you're locking it each year and you're taking the decision each year with regards to what you want to do. Okay? The problem is, if you don't elect to do it now, you will not get that chance later on. They will shut the door. Okay? Sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm really confused.
That's all right. That's fine. That's okay.
Are you suggesting that you would need to pay that every year until you retire?
Every year until you retire.
So I would need to pay 1.48 of my gross salary every year until I was 60?
Yep.
For what kind of gain?
For, well, basically what I'll take you through the gain in a second,
Right.
okay? Because that's the worked example that we did, okay?
I thought it would just be one-off payments.
So I thought as you then aged, you'd
Yeah.
have to pay more and
You
more.
do have to pay more. You do have to pay more.
So the first time you pay it,
Yeah.
you double, and then the second time, if you then even turn 40,
If you
two,
turn,
then you're
42.
up to 0.76, and
Yeah.
then when you turn 44, you're up to
0.77,
0.77.
0.79, well, 0.78, 0.79, and it goes up and up and up. Okay? Right? But the important bit is what you're doing is you're locking those years. So each year you do it, you lock 1 year, and then you move to the next year, and then you move to the next year. And my understanding is, if you're in the scheme, you have the flexibility to increase your years or decrease your years. But you have to be in the scheme to do it. If you haven't elected to go into the scheme, doors shut, that's it, you're subject to the state pension age. Okay?
Can you elect to go in the scheme and then do nothing?
No. You have to buy at least 1 year. At least 1 year.
But then you can buy additional years.
Then you can buy additional years from then on. But don't forget, you would be locking in for your 15 and 16 year, you are locking your pension age, say for example at 66. Then you can decide, and that's why we're saying, look guys, give it serious consideration, at least dip your toe in. You haven't really lost anything, right, by doing it. You'll get the money back, say for example at 60, right, which sounds an awful long way away, but as we all know, it's getting closer very rapidly. But if you don't do it, then that door's locked, okay? 'Cause we've got,
If you do it for 3 years,
yep,
at the end when you're 60,
yep,
your pension will be you'll have two different numbers to calculate your pension on,
You will.
one for 3 years and one for the rest of the time.
correct. That's absolutely spot on, which is going to be a nightmare to try and calculate out. But this is the beast that they have invented. Okay? Gets even better because I'm going to come on and start talking about faster accrual. Okay? But the most important bit with this is the 6 months clock is not just ticking, it's nearly ticked out, and we need to encourage people to look at this as soon as possible. Okay? If we then go on and we look at faster accrual, okay, now this I do see as a very good deal, or as a good opportunity, should I say. Even if you compare this to additional pension, I think this is slightly better than additional pension, which was the first option I talked about back under the old scheme. With this one, you have the ability to enhance your accrual rate all the way down to 1/45. Alright, now this one, there is no time limit. It's not that you have to do it by the 30th of September. With this one, as long as you elect to do it before the 1st of April, and then you have to elect to do it every single year from then on. But this, again, seems to make quite a difference to your pension scheme, as I'll come on and explain. I don't think it's fair how they've done it, because one, they're turning around and saying you've got to elect to do it, that's it, full stop. Okay? With this one, they're saying no, you have to elect to do it every single year. So why can't they apply that to the other one? They've done that in the health system, they've done that in the civil service schemes as well, just the teacher scheme that they haven't done it, and SSTA have written off to the SPPA to ask the questions. Cost-wise, yeah, for myself, I think we worked it out at 47, I'd be paying about 6.5%, 6.6%. But this is the example I want to take you through, because this guy rang on. This is a teacher, date of birth 27th of July 1972. Joined teaching quite late, and on the 31st of March 2014 he had 7 years and 224 days service, so he was just in to the pre-2007 scheme. Okay, but it was in the 2007 scheme. His salary, the last 12 months, works out at 34,542. And because he came into teaching late, he'd already started making additional voluntary contributions of £200 a month. Okay, don't forget, this is a live case. Okay, he rang me now about probably 3 weeks ago and said, "Well, Stuart, am I better paying the £200 a month to the ABCs, or am I better looking at the faster accrual and looking at the ERBO? Okay, what would the difference be?" If nothing had changed, okay, his total expected income at 60 would have been 12,640. The reason being, Prudential had given him a quote of £1,190 per annum as his pension, and his superannuation pension was going to work out 11,450. Figures changed slightly with him going into the new scheme, once we'd allowed for the actuarial adjustment and going into section 2015, and the total expected income at 60 dropped slightly to 12,252. The reason being his pension income from superannuation dropped to 11,062, but everything else remained constant. Okay, so what should he do? Well, we then looked at the £200 and we said, okay, well, ERBO is going to cost 1.52% of your gross salary. On a monthly basis, that's a contribution of £35 a month. Okay, so we're not talking about a massive contribution. Now again, I appreciate the fact some people do looking at it going, it may not be a massive contribution, Stuart, but I've got 3 kids, and some people can't literally do that. That's fine.
And that's out your net salary?
That's out your net salary. Okay, that's what you would see your salary reduced by. Okay? The cost of the additional accrual was 6.47%. Now that was a bit of a pain to work out. Okay, because if you look at the rates table on the website, it will give you the faster accrual based on a state pension age. You then have to allow for a factor in that because you're locking your state pension age at 65. Okay, and that's why when you look at it, if you put the details in, you go, well, that figure's wrong, that figure's high. It's not, that figure's pretty accurate, okay, because we've made for that allowance. Long story short, this guy was paying, if he stopped paying the Prudential and moved this across to Ergo in the faster accrual, he was paying slightly less. I'm happy enough with him paying slightly less because don't forget the costs are going to go up as he gets older. So what he can do is he can take that £17 and he can bank that, okay, and use it to pay the additional contributions as he works his way up. Interestingly, okay, his total expected income at 60 suddenly jumps to £14,474. Okay, and that's with stopping the AVCs and starting doing this. Well, I wouldn't like to be the Prudential at the minute, but that's, as far as I can see, that's the benefits of the scheme. Okay, which means you're in a situation where actually, you know, you can really start looking at trying to take control of your pension. And this again, I stress again, this is retiring at 60. Okay, this allows for the actuarial adjustments, etc. Now, the one that is time-bound is Ergo, and I was having a conversation with a very nice lady this afternoon, and it was, look, let's do Ergo now, and let's tidy up the faster accrual later on in the year, because we're exceptionally busy at the minute. There's lots and lots and lots of interest in this, and we're doing everything we can to get back to everyone, okay, to talk through with them, okay? At which point, yeah, get Ergo done, then we can tidy the rest of it up later on, okay? Other things to look at. There's a couple of schemes that are available at the minute. Winding down, I'm not going to talk too much about. I'll tell you why I believe winding down will disappear, because I can't see how winding down works under this new scheme. Okay, so I believe it will disappear in 10-12 years' time. Right, so I'm not going to waste too much time on that. But I am going to talk about phased retirement, because phased retirement is here now, and I think phased retirement is going to morph and possibly even improve. Okay, I'll explain the rules as they stand at the minute. If you are after the age of 55, if you change 5 days a week to 4 days a week, and you only have to do that for 12 months, you can access up to 75% of your pension. Okay, so you can turn around and say, right, I will go to, say for example, 3 days a week. I'm going to take a hit on my salary, but I'm going to bring my pension in at 75% of it. That's the maximum I can take from it. And I'm going to put that in, and do you know what? I'm going to use that to top up my income. And I've got access to my lump sum, I've got access to my income. Now don't forget, you're taking it 5 years early. Okay, so you're going to suffer the actuarial adjustment on it. But you have the ability to do it, and it's a very useful method for people who have come to the end of their rope, have tied a knot in it, are hanging on and their fingernails are starting to bleed. Okay, in other words, they're looking for a way out. Alternatively, where this becomes particularly useful is for people who are over the age of 60. Okay, who say for example have 37 years service, have had enough but haven't really had enough, okay, are more than happy to sort of continue at 2 or 3 days a week. Because this gives you the ability to go to 3 days a week. If you've 37 years service, you're actually in the situation that your take-home pay with your pension and your salary is going to be more than your take-home pay working full-time. You're still in the pension scheme, so you're still making contributions to the scheme, which is going to pay out later on. Okay, and more importantly, the rule of abatement doesn't apply on phased retirement. Okay, which means you can do as much as you want. Okay. But the reason I'm talking about this, they have turned around and said you can split your benefits, so you can have your pre-2007 benefits and your pre-2015 benefits separately. And I think one of the things that they're thinking of doing, because to me it seems logical, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll do it, but it seems logical, there should be nothing to stop you getting to the age of 60 and saying, do you know what, I'm going to take my pre-2007 benefits now. I'm going to continue to work, okay? Now, whether you will have to drop by 20% or whatever, I don't know. But it means that people will then be in the situation that they'll get to 60, retire a bit, go to 3 or 2 days a week, continue working on, and then retire closer, say for example, to the age of 65, so they won't be suffering as much of an actuarial adjustment. Okay, now to me that works because you're going to have a teacher at the top of scale, dropping to 3 days a week, okay, which frees up budget, which then can bring another teacher in, lower down the scale, okay, you're still paying the same amount of tax, right, which again is very, very hot for the revenue. They want to make sure that, that's coming in. They've got another teacher coming in who's then going to start paying tax, so they're actually getting more tax, etc., etc., etc. So I think they are going to be looking at flexible ways that people can retire and manage their working life going forward, okay, if they want to work after the age of 60. But one of the important messages I want to get across is you can actually, I still maintain that if you could have afforded to retire at 60 under the pre-2007 scheme, you can afford to retire under this scheme at 60 as well. Okay? Happy enough? Follow the logic? Go for it.
Is there an option to retire at 60, taking your pre-2007, but then not take the other pension, not work?
Yes.
And leave the pension
Yes,
in
you
place
can do
until
that.
you're 65?
Yes, you can do that.
And then just get a wee enhancement
Yep.
when you're 65?
And then it's not actuarially
Then it's not actuarially reduced, or less actuarially reduced when you take it because you're closer to 65.
And it would still be based on your best 3 years? No, what one is it? No,
Your
on the last-
pre-2007 scheme will be based on that, but don't forget the career average scheme is based on all those 157s sitting here,
Oh, yes, right.
okay? And you can leave those on the shelf, okay, and then take them.
The 157 is going to apply from 2015.
Correct, correct, that's
But
exactly.
if you're already at the top of the scale,
Yeah,
it's quite good.
it is indeed. Okay? Now, Seamus normally comes back on at this point to finish off, okay? And basically what Seamus says is, look, because I never like doing it, I am available, first of all, for one-to-ones. I'm also available to come out to schools, okay? Seamus is not precious, whether I'm coming out to schools to do presentations, just to talk to SSTA members, or alternatively members of the school. There's quite a number of schools that are saying, actually, look, can we get this guy in and actually do a full talk. That offer is there for you,